we should have this generation of the mind that we're not doing what we usually would do on a Saturday night, and we're doing other things. And for some of us, it might be suffering. For some of us, it might be half and half, happy and suffering. For some of us, it's totally happiness. And for some of us, neutral, mixed, investigative, whatever. But the point is, we've collected the causes, and we've collected the wish, and we've made some kind of wish inside to receive something better in our lives, to better our lives, and to better the lives around us. So in this case, it happens to be, it manifested as a Dharma. And out of all the Dharma activities that we can do, the most supreme is receiving and giving Dharma. That's the most supreme. That's why there's a lot of rituals and there's a lot of supportive factors around Dharma. Example, everywhere in the Buddhist world, everybody wants Dharma. Everybody wants Dharma talk, and it's growing very, very much in the West, tremendously. You know, hundreds and hundreds of centers are springing, literally hundreds. And the point is this, is that people want Dharma because people are educated, and people are smart, and people are investigative, and they can think. And they're beyond the point of magic and mystery and secret chants and all that stuff. There is, and their secrecy is different than what we're used to knowing. But people want Dharma because people, everything is growing in their lives. You know, materialism and the convenience and easiness in their lives grow, and expands. And therefore, so when it expands, everything around us expands. Everything around us expands, everything around us grows, everything becomes more convenient. But unfortunately, we become more and more busy and more entailed, more and more tired, although everything becomes easier. If we notice, everything's quite easy. Travel, transportation, communication, whatever we want to do is much easier than 100, 200, 300, 1,000 years ago. Yet we still don't have the time. And what it is that the more things we have, the more things that grow around us, the more distractions we have. The more distractions we have, the more places we have our mind to play with. And when we have more places to play with our mind, what happens is we get distracted. Distracted from what? Distracting from finding ourselves. Distracted from peace. Distracted from happiness. It's a lot of distraction. So, having things that are modern and convenient can be a plus if we know how to use it. Having things that are not modern and not convenient and not knowing how to deal with it can be suffering also. Suffering is not this way or that way. Whatever era we live in, we have to have our priorities correct. And at our level, at this moment, our priority should be ourselves. At this moment, at our level, it should be ourselves. But we need to prioritize ourselves in a correct way. And that correct way is to find the causes for us and ourselves to have genuine, lasting, real qualities of the mind that make us not be unpleasant, and not be unpleasant to ourselves and others. And qualities in our mind such as patience and perseverance and happiness, real happiness. Happiness that's not based on something that doesn't create happiness, but we deceive ourselves thinking it creates happiness, but real happiness. And if we look at the world, and we look at philosophies, and we look at different ideologies, and we look at different philosophies and thinkings and cultures and backgrounds, they all offer many methods to be so-called, inverted commas, happy. And yet, everywhere, now it's even more so, people are very, very unhappy, very materialistic. And materialistic not because they're greedy, because they're looking for happiness. They're thinking if they have more of this, more of that, they'll be happy. And the trend goes on and on and on. And what happens is that no one really finds happiness from something outer. It just brings some temporary relief. So what we need to do is we need to find the real causes of unhappiness, real causes of impatience, real causes of our anger, and real causes of our dissatisfaction that we so often feel. I hear a lot of people over the years say they're bored. They get bored with things fast. And people who are very intelligent, they get bored with things very, very fast. They do something, they do it for a while, and then they leave it, and they move on to another thing, and they think they're unstable. And they think that they're not a consistent person. But I disagree with that. Because I think that highly intelligent people they move on to things and they move from here to there is not because they're inconsistent. It's because their minds can penetrate and say, this is not it. This is not what makes me happy. This is not what makes me good. This is not what's going to solve my problem. And then they move on, and they move on, they move on, they move on. A lot of people like that. But you see, they don't have the knowledge to look deeper and to figure out what is really wrong. So they label themselves and consequently have other people label them inconsistent. It's not inconsistency, because there are things, no matter how inconsistent a person is, there's factors in their life that they are inconsistent. They are consistent, definitely. Because if we're inconsistent, we're inconsistent. If we're consistent, we're consistent. So the point is that these type of people I've noticed over the years are very dissatisfied. And they don't have the knowledge, the wisdom, and they don't have the input, more the input information, to make them gauge deeper into why they feel dissatisfied with things, why they feel unhappy with things, why they feel bored with things, and why they move on from things very fast, and why they need to always be occupied. They don't have that knowledge. They don't have the input. They don't have the greater information to digest. So therefore, they move on in life, and consequently, a lot of these people, their intelligence, their abilities are wasted. They're wasted because they didn't have the information. So if we look at different ideologies of different governments, not to get so political, but ideology of different governments. No country, rich or poor, your citizens are happy. If you go to America, you have the other extreme. Why is it in the United States you have the most violent crimes, and it's very common, and it's a common word daily in their lives that we go for counseling, we go for help. I'm going to go see my psychologist. I'm going to see my shrink. I'm going to see my counselor. Why is that such a common thing? And some people can't survive without it. And because they have all the means to be free of spending a lot of hours to earn a lot of money, so they have all this excess time to dwell on their unhappiness. So consequently, they become unhappy. And a lot of deviancy and crimes and lots of manifestation of unhappiness manifests in countries like that, advanced countries. And then you go to countries that are so-called, inverted commas, poor, or third world, or developing nations. And you don't see so much psychological disturbances and people discussing their feelings and all that, because they're just trying to find the means to survive. Their time goes into surviving and finding the means to survive. And what happens is their time is occupied in finding resources to survive and working very hard. And they don't have time to be depressed. They don't have time to be angry. They don't have time to be dissatisfied, because they need to survive and they have responsibilities. And it's literally survival. Whereas in so-called, inverted commas, advanced countries, people don't have to work that hard, so-called physically, to survive. But they have to work another way to survive, which is the excess time that they have, the overabundance that they have, the overconvenience that they have, is leading the mind to a next level of they need to do more for excitement. They need to do more to get out of boredom. They need more to get out of their daily doldrums of life. And so therefore they go into all types of deviancies. They try new things. They try new crimes. They try new ways to, new sensations. They try new kind of mind-shocking ways to get attention. They resort to killing young kids. They shoot out in McDonald's, and they do all types of things. Why? Because they don't have to worry about survival. Survival is very easy, physical survival. But mental survival, no. So whether you look in an advanced country, so-called advanced, and I use these labels because to me they're just labels. And then you look at countries that they don't have the excess time and resources, and they physically need to survive. Both of them suffer. Both of them suffer tremendously. When you're in advanced nations such as America, especially in the big cities, it's very scary. You are a part of crime all the time. You're a victim of crime all the time. And you always have to be alert on crime. And the crime there is not simply just purse snatching. It's really, really, it could go very intense, the kind of crimes that's committed on people. And it's shocking. It's very, very shocking. And that comes as a result of dissatisfaction, overabundance and dissatisfaction, where we don't know the cause of unhappiness. We don't know the cause of what makes us feel unhappy. And therefore, the mind needs an outlet. And the outlet always is another person, because it's very samsara nature to blame someone else or blame something on the outside for things we experience. Very samsaric nature. And nobody thinks wrong of that. Nobody. Nobody thinks wrong about that at all, because they don't know any other method. They don't know a superior method. So what happens is in very poor countries is the same thing. In the poor countries, everybody is to be blamed for their poverty. The government, the local officials, bureaucracy, they have all types of reasons, corruption, etc., etc. But the bottom line is neither side is happy. Neither side is successful. Neither side has achieved something. And at the end of all this, at the end of your money and your house and your car and your kids or whatever you have that you think is a product, the result of your life, at the end, you just die. And when you die, when you sum up your life, what is the sum of it? Someone else in a developing country or poor country, when they die, they were lucky they lived this long to die. And then I was thinking they're lucky to die, but to me, it's all the same. It's all the same. Of course, if I have a preference, I'll pick a country like Malaysia where everything's so convenient if I have a choice. But ultimately, for a practitioner, a person who practices the mind, developing the mind, anywhere can, anything can, any place can, anytime can. Why? They have developed this type of mind that can withstand and absorb. And the outer sources that create unhappiness for normal people, in fact, becomes for them neutral or a cause to be happy, to be very, very happy. Example, if you understand the doctrine of karma and you study it well, and you think about it and logically put it in your mind and you contemplate on it and it goes in, it's quite logical. And when you understand that and you intellectually grasp it, the next step is to believe. When you understand, you believe. When you believe in karma, I'll give you an example. When you're very sick, instead of being irritable with people around you, dropping your responsibilities, forgetting about everything, and being generally uncouth and impolite, and you just, me, I'm sick. A practitioner who's sick is sick. They do feel pain. They do have fever or whatever, and they are tired, they are weak. But you see, the way they absorb that is different. A normal person who's sick is just, I'm sick, I want to get well, I want to get well. A practitioner wants to get well too. But during the duration of their sickness, they have a different attitude. They have a completely different attitude. The attitude would be, as Lati Rinpoche said, that they will think, in a high practitioner's case, may my guru's obstacles for spreading Dharma to benefit many people fall upon me, and while I suffer, may his obstacles clear. May my mother and father, may my brothers and sisters, may my family, or maybe you saw someone outside that suffers tremendously, and you visualize that person, and you think about that person, and you suffer for them. And you say, I will suffer, and I am happy to suffer, because as I suffer, I dedicate it to this person that they don't suffer. So your suffering is not wasted. Your pain is not wasted. It benefits a lot of people. How does it benefit you? A, you burn up the causes for you to be ill. 2, B, when you're ill, you train your mind to withstand adverse circumstances. So that when real adverse circumstances come, you don't lose the presence of your mind and do something really silly that does long-term damage. 3, you're suffering. But during your suffering, in a normal state of mind, it's me, 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 me. You're able to think about others. You're able to expand your mind. You're able to grow beyond that. Because you see, we may have a suffering body now, but we may not always have a suffering body in the future. We may even be in forms of life that has no bodies, the formless state. But the mind is what is important in development of the mind. So you actually use your body and its experiences to make the mind grow. So we can feel sickness, we can feel jealousy, we can feel hatred, we can feel anger, we can feel dissatisfaction. We can feel all that. Practitioners feel that, non-practitioners feel that. But either way, how you deal with it is which will result in you growing or not growing and being a benefit to others. So a practitioner, on top of that, will do Donglin practice. Donglin is a meditation upon taking and giving, where you visualize everybody, all sentient beings, enemies and all. Their negative karma and their negative sickness forms in the form of black light and absorbs into your right nostril. And you take it in. And you're happy to take it in. And you have this fever and you're sick and you're weak. And then your health and your healing and what good you have comes in the form of white light, and it goes to all sentient beings. And it actually rains on them what they need and what they want. And they become healthy and become strong. Now, whether that really happens or not is a different story. For high practitioners, it is said that they can do that. But for us, you're thinking, well, if we can't do that, why visualize that? Because you're creating causes that you can do that. And you're saying, but why would I want to absorb suffering for myself? You're not absorbing, because when you reach that state when you can do that, you don't suffer. You don't suffer at all. For normal people like eek, their fundamental practice is give away suffering to others, and I take all the fun and happiness. That's a fundamental practice of basic people. You know, when you say you want suffering, they say no. Would you suffer for them? No. But you see, that's not a foreign idea to us. That's not some weird Buddha sitting over there, you know, in India telling us this crazy thing, absorb things. Because we hear heroes in our life. We hear about people who jump in the line of fire to save somebody else. And how do we feel about that person? You know, wow, they've developed that kind of mind. And the thing is, that mind can be developed. And if that kind of mind is developed, that you can suffer for others. You can absorb suffering for others. You know what happens? You become very happy. That when you suffer, you are suffering without suffering. You're very happy. Why? Because you know it's for a purpose. So if somebody says to you, hey, you know, I'm going to whip you. But if I whip you, those 500 people there are going to be released from jail, and they're not going to get whipped. They're innocent people, you know, they're bystanders of war or whatever. And I'm going to release them if you get whipped. Any normal person will say, okay. I mean, they'll be scared. You know, it's going to be painful, and it's going to, you know, they're going to have no miracle healings. And definitely, but what happens is, while you're suffering, you don't suffer because it's painful, but your mind's not in pain. And you're in high practitioners, people who are trained their mind to that level, they'll be very happy. Because each time they feel the whip on their back, they know these people will be released. That's why people, bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara, Chenetsi Kuan Yin, same thing, always make prayers to Shakyamuni that they may be born in the lowest, the darkest, the most hellish, the most uncomfortable, the most nastiest places, because they know that Kuan Yin knows that in those places reside beings who suffer in that way, that have no hope. And nobody else will pray to go to those places to help them. So Kuan Yin, as one of the 8 great bodhisattvas, students of Lord Buddha, will actually pray. Always, every day, all the time, may I be born in the most nastiest place, the most horrible place, the most war-torn place, the place that has the most suffering. It might be a light, may I be their food, may I be their shelter, may I be their protection, may I be their hope, may I be their light, may I be the one. And consequently, Kuan Yin never gets born there. Never. She never, ever gets born in a nasty, ugly, horrible place. Why? For her to wish that exhausts the very causes to be in that place. So what happens is that Kuan Yin doesn't get born there out of desire, attachment, and karma, and no control. She will emanate there out of control, in control, with control, to control. Why? She's exhausted the very causes to be born in a nasty place. And even when she's in a nasty place, the place will turn around because of her presence. The people's hearts will turn around because of her presence. Why? She has that type of mind that can influence others. She has that type of mind. You know, I remember many, many years ago in the 80s when I was in the States, I heard there was some kind of standoff or some kind of war going on in the Middle East. I can't remember where exactly. In any case, a lot of kids and women and you know, old people were suffering, and they were just totally innocent. And the Mother Teresa wrote a letter to the government there and said, can we have 1 day of ceasefire so that I can fly in and take all these people out and treat them? In the United States, she appealed to U.S. and many governments, because I saw the documentary. I can't remember what country though. And everybody said, oh, who's going to listen to this old nun, you know? Somewhere she's Christian and, you know, it's crazy, you know? No way. And Mother Teresa prayed. She prayed the whole night. And the next day she got news. She's allowed to come in. And there was a ceasefire. It was a miracle. It was a modern day miracle. Both governments, whoever they were, I can't remember, stopped fighting. And I saw the documentary where they flew in and all her sisters of charity went in there and got hundreds of people out that were very, very sick. And that they interviewed Mother Teresa. And they said, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? She said, love. Love. And everybody can feel her sincerity, this old little wrinkled lady. Everybody can feel it. And she did that. And she's a modern day Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin, the definitive Kuan Yin is compassion. Compassion without motive. Compassion without self-cherishing mind. You don't do something for the sake of getting something. You do it for the sake of benefiting others. And that's why I say practitioners of every country, race, creed, and religion can develop these type of people. Not just Buddhists. Many people. If we think only Buddhists can, that's very, very narrow. That's very, very illogical. It's not true. But since we are Buddhists, or since we're interested in Buddhism, then we use this method to develop that kind of mind. But that's not the only way. So there are many cases of that. Example, Mahatma Gandhi, who is a very devout Hindu and a living Buddha. He can stop communal wars and lots of problems and fighting just by fasting, by starving his body to death for the sake of others. And people will be moved by his selflessness, moved by his compassion, moved by his great love. And where that arise from? It arose from the pujas he did every day, the faith he had in the doctrine of ahimsa, of peace, peaceful methods, and his vow of celibacy, his vow that he dedicated to others. And so we can see someone like that in the Hindu faith who saved millions of people, hundreds and millions of people, just by giving himself up. And in the end, he was shot. And you say, well, what's the purpose? You see, when he was shot, it was very significant because that's the end of his corporeal body, but his mind will reincarnate again to benefit. And when he was shot, the last thing he said is, oh my God, I forgive you. I forgive you. Imagine his practice has reached that level that it was his last breath. I forgive you. When His Holiness, the previous Pope, the previous one, not the current one, was in the US, in the 80s, also he was shot. And when he was shot, I was very moved because he was in a hospital and we heard many times that the Pope requested the authorities not to prosecute and hurt the person that shot him. And oh my God, he really is the Jesus Christ. He really is a representative of the Jesus spirit on this planet. And you can see he's not a fake because he's quite humble, quite kind. He doesn't make any trouble. He doesn't do anything bad. He's held his post very well. He does his best to pray and bless the people as best as he can. The blessing is what? The spreading the word of compassion. And the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Pope are very good friends. They meet all the time, pray together, all the time, many, many times, the previous Pope. And so when I heard that, I was so moved. And I really believed in him. And I really, a lot of faith grew in me, in him. And my respect of Christianity grew even more. Why? Because if someone practices correctly, they can develop that kind of mind. So, and he was pleading, please don't prosecute, don't prosecute, don't hurt him. Don't, I'm all right, I survived. And then we can see that when people push that state, what kind of people they really are inside. And I think that we can develop that quality. If they can, why can't we? It's just getting input, knowledge, and practice.